Hi guys, today we are going to be looking at the studio tracks Oasis laid down and the background and recording of what is easily their best known and most loved hit, Wonderwall. First of all, let's look at how the song was written. Now there are various contradictory versions of how this song was written. Noel clearly told Nick Brine, the sound engineer for What's the Story Morning Glory, this story.
He had kind of the basis of a lot of the songs. Wonderwall, I think, was written on the train on the way to the studio. And
I clearly remember reading an interview in, I think it was Q magazine, in the 90s, where Noel told a similar tall tale, claiming to have written the whole song in 5 minutes. It is, however, clear from the following interviews that this was just Noel being something of an unreliable interviewee. The song was clearly, patiently, slowly crafted over time in multiple locations.
So what were you thinking when you wrote this song? Let's just forget about the game for a moment, right? Because I was hammered, actually. Where did you write it? In your house? I wrote a bit of it in Scotland, and I wrote a bit of it in Camden, and I wrote a bit of it in... I might wrote a bit of it in Brighton. Chance you can write a song in one place.
And that song started off, it was called, a fan one night after a gig gave me, earnestly put this thing into my hand, and she closed it and she said, "That's your wishing stone." And I was like, "Oh right." She said, "You should write a song about that." And I was like, "Okay, can you let go of my hand then?" And I wrote this song, and the title was, Wonderwall for a long time was called Wishing Stone, and I thought, it's a bit of I don't know about that. And then I seen the Wonderwall poster and went, hang on a minute. Hang on, if I did you're my Wonderwall.
And somebody bought me a little contraption that goes on the guitar called a capo, right? And it's kind of a little thing that you pop on the frets so you can move your voice up in higher keys. I'd never even heard of one, as oddly as that seems now, because every single one of my songs has got a capo on it now. I'd never heard of it. I'd never heard of a capo. Somebody got me one, and I was like... What? And I remember just strumming the chords and thinking, well, they're actually quite original. Do you know what I mean? That's actually quite... This is probably the first original thing I've ever done, you know. I was writing it because I had these chords for a long, long time. Mm-hmm. And these are just the major chords. Which to me wasn't really saying anything, really. They're just chords I'd use all the time, and it didn't really set one mood. So then I just started just to leave my third finger on there, so everything becomes a seventh, I believe. So the third finger holding that string down gives it, it's like a constant, one constant note, it's like a constant singing out note. So then I decided to leave my little finger on there, so it simulates the hybrids, and then that became just like a cry.
So you can see from those interviews that the song was clearly written in multiple locations over time. It evolved, it went through different versions, different names, regardless of what Noel said when he was probably off his head on cocaine in interviews in the 90s. The "I just wrote this song on the train" line was apparently something of a fairly well-used racket by Noel in the 90s. Check out this interview clip from the Definitely Maybe documentary with Alan McGee.
I think he had 50 songs when he met me, and he used to lie, and he used to tell me that he'd just written one on the train. And I think the guy had been writing for about 5 years before he met me, and he had about 50 songs, and he had the first 2 albums.
According to Owen Morris, he was the first person who Noel played his final version of Wonderwall to on the first day of recording at Rockfield. Now, anyone who has watched some of my previous videos on the many studio tracks that were recorded for various Oasis songs on the Morning Glory album will be aware that most of those songs were very, very complex, multi-layered arrangements, some of them going up to 23, 25 tracks. When you listen to Wonderwall, however, it does stand out as a much more sparse and spacious arrangement compared to, say, Don't Look Back in Anger or Champagne Supernova. And interestingly, with Wonderwall, Noel did have a more complicated arrangement in mind, but he discussed it with Owen Morris early on, and Morris, quite rightly I think, talked him out of it. Have a listen.
Wonderwall we didn't hear until the week of the session.
Yeah.
And he played it to me, I think, on the first day.
Mm-hmm.
And he was just checking the arrangement. He had a more complicated arrangement, alternate arrangement.
Yes.
But we settled on the simpler arrangement. But I remember him playing it to me once, and I think he had a slightly different way of getting into the bridges and a kind of instrumentally bit after the first chorus, which sounded unnecessary to me.
Yes.
Sounded overcomplicated.
Yes.
Now, if you're curious and would like to hear a much more complex, multi-layered version of this song, all you need to do is listen to the opening track of Be Here Now. Do you know what I mean? It's the same chord sequence, but recorded with about 3 million guitar overdubs. So when it comes to Wonderwall, for my money, Owen Morris called it right, as usual. Now here's the amazing thing about Wonderwall. This song was and still is an incredible worldwide global hit, but none of the band had heard it before they recorded it in the studio, and they only spent 8 hours recording it.
So we recorded Wonderwall that day, pretty much finished it apart from the one little piano tinkly overdub at the end. That was recorded in like 8 hours, maybe less.
So now, let's take a look at the individual tracks recorded for Wonderwall. First up, we have the brilliant drum groove laid down by Alan White. And this drum track is all the more impressive for the fact that Alan White had never heard the song before and had literally only just joined the band.
On Wonderwall, we've got the tempo for the song, Noel would do an acoustic guitar take, and then he'd do a guide vocal take along to the click. And then Alan White would overdub along to that. And Noel would sit in the studio watching Alan White and directing him as to where the fills are coming up. So there was very little rehearsal. So we'd basically go straight into record. And if Noel didn't like the sound of what was happening, or it didn't, go with the dynamics of the song, what Alan was doing, we'd stop and we'd just rewind and drop in.
Yes.
So we'd have a drum track within maybe half an hour.
Next up, we have the most important percussion instrument for the indie sound, and that's the tambourine. And we know this is being played by Alan White because, in the credits, he is listed as playing the percussion. Next up, buried very low in the mix, but there nonetheless, we have a shaker. Once again, this is probably Alan White because he is listed in the credits as playing the percussion. Next, we come to the contentious area of who played bass on What's the Story Morning Glory. The 3 main people who were in the studio booth for the majority of the time were Nick Bryan, the sound engineer, Owen Morris, the producer, and Noel Gallagher. And very confusingly, we have conflicting accounts from Owen Morris and Nick Bryan. Have a listen.
We would, I did a lot of the bass actually with Grigsy. Noel and Owen would have a break, we'd have a kind of mess around with the tracks to record a couple of options. Noel might come in, lay down a part that he maybe thought he should follow, and then maybe Grigsy would take that on board. But there might have been the odd track, maybe Noel's part ended up on there, but mainly, Grigsy would do the tracks. Noel would come up with some parts like Wonderwall and things like that. He came up with the bass line.
And then usually Noel would put the bass down. I think Griggs played bass on maybe a few tracks. But Griggs, God bless him, wasn't the best musician in the world. You know, he's great live and stuff, but it was just quicker for Noel to do a bass take, which Noel will do in 1 or 2 takes,
Yes.
with maybe a couple of drop-ins for, you know, a couple of bits of time in here and there.
So Owen Morris says Noel recorded most of the tracks and Grigsy did 1 or 2. Nick Bryan says Grigsy did most of the tracks and Noel did 1 or 2. But thankfully all of them do seem to concur that Noel actually recorded the bass guitar on this song. So bass guitar, Noel Gallagher. Next, we move on to the guitar tracks.
There was a conscious effort, maybe guitar-wise, not to go too over the top. I mean, there's still lots of guitars on there, but they're not kind of as raw and edgy and as layered as what happened on Be Here Now when we did that. But it was kind of melody was a big thing with the guitars as well.
The first thing you hear in the song is Noel Gallagher's signature rhythm guitar sequence for the verses. This was played on a Takamine acoustic guitar, which is now owned by the studio engineer Nick Bryan.
So Noel had that guitar. It's the one he wrote Wonderwall on the train on the way down. He'd written a lot of the album on that guitar and a lot of the songs, because that was the one he had up in his room as well, whereas at Rockfield. So it was one of his. It was the one he was writing on at the time. He recorded a lot of the album with that guitar and then some of the album with his Gibson. Yeah, but that was the Takamine that he used for that, which I ended up getting later on the first day of the Be Here Now session.
Got your guitar there.
Is that mine?
Do you remember giving me that guitar?
Did I give it to
From
you?
the sessions.
No way.
You didn't give me this until Abbey Road, Be Here Now.
Right.
Because mine was in 1,000 pieces on the control room of Abbey Road floor.
Oh, because we're in a
Somebody
fight.
thought it was yours.
So someone called Liam had smashed my guitar up.
Yeah. So you gave me this one.
Yeah, there was a bit of an argument about who was going to buy me a new guitar to replace the one that my mum had given to me. Big sentimental value that guitar had to me, and there was a big argument ensued about who was going to get me it. And in the end, Noel took me. We was in Abbey Road, and Noel took me downstairs into the studio and just said, "You remember this guitar from What's the Story?" And I was like, "Yeah." He says, "Well, you can have that one." So he'd outdone Liam. Liam was going to take me down Denmark Street, get me any guitar I wanted, but I said, "That'll do, Noel."
So I would have used it on this record.
Yeah.
So that's the one I played Wonderwall on. Giving guitars away.
Yeah.
I must have been high. Was I?
I think
I was high, wasn't
I think so.
So, acoustic guitar 1, Noel Gallagher. Now there is a second acoustic guitar track buried down in the mix, thickening out the texture. In my previous video, I attributed this part to Bonehead because it's playing bar chords, and you can see in the Wonderwall music video Bonehead playing the exact same part. However, after I put that video live, Bonehead himself actually tweeted me to say on the record he didn't play. So this is Noel Gallagher. So, even though it's a bar chord part and you can see Bonehead playing the exact same part in the video, for some reason in the studio Noel played that part.
So with Wonderwall, we'd have the drums and bass down by midday, 1 o'clock. I think Noel probably overdubbed 3 or 4 acoustic guitars then. Probably 3. I think 3 was the magic number at the time, for whatever reason.
So acoustic guitar part 2, Noel Gallagher again. Then we come to the acoustic lead guitar part, and this is a very common Noel riff. He uses the exact same riff on the chorus of Talk Tonight. And we know this is played by Noel because Owen Morris clearly says he laid down 3 acoustic guitar tracks. So we've got the acoustic rhythm that opens the song, we've got the acoustic bar chord rhythm that comes in on the second verse, and we've got the acoustic lead. Interestingly, in certain live settings, Bonehead actually played this part live, but on the recording it was, once again, Noel. here's an interesting one that most people aren't aware of, because you can only really hear it clearly on the Super Audio CD, and it's electric guitar. Now this is clearly Noel once again because it's just a double tracking of his acoustic lead guitar part. So we know from the interview with Owen Morris that that acoustic lead part was Noel, and this electric part is basically the same, so it's Noel again. Next, we come on to the mellotron. Now you can see from that tweet from Bonehead that it was him who played it, but the story behind it is kind of interesting. Listen to how Owen Morris puts it.
So on Morning Glory, we got a mellotron in. I think Bonehead insisted on playing like the cello part, which I came up with on Wonderwall, and then I added a bit more to it later. But whatever, you know. I think it was after we had the vocal that, you know, the mellotron was there, and it was like, well, Bonehead wasn't going to play his usual strum along bar chords on this track, so I went and picked out the, you know, the root notes, showed him where those were, and then just got him to play those on the cello sound, which we all liked.
So I find that really interesting. Unlike Guigsy, who seemed to just kind of roll over and take it if Noel said, I'm playing your part, Bonehead fought to be on the recording. I kind of respect that. So even though Noel blatantly just played his part on the recording, Bonehead still put up a fight and ended up being one of the most prominent musicians on the track. Good for him. So the first mellotron track, following just the low octave root notes, is played by Bonehead. Now there is a second mellotron part, and you can hear it quite clearly in the choruses, and it's not playing root notes, it's playing a kind of higher octave harmony part. I believe this was played by Owen Morris because he clearly says that he went back and added certain parts in there, and he says that Bonehead mainly just played the root notes. So I'm going to say the second mellotron track, Owen Morris. Next we have the piano. All sources agree this was recorded by Noel, although it was recorded last of all, a few weeks later, just because the outro needed something to fill in the space there.
There's one little piano line which comes in at the end. I think Noel did a few weeks later, when we just said it just needs something, you know, anything, just to sort of keep it going.
I do remember there was a piano in the hallway, right? I'm sure I remember doing that bit at the end of Wonderwall. The I remember doing it there.
Same piano?
Is that the one?
Yeah.
So piano, Noel Gallagher. Next, of course, we have the lead vocals by Liam.
Then on the third day, that was when Noel said to Liam, which one do you want to sing? Do you want to sing Wonderwall or do you want to sing Don't Look Back in Anger? And I think because Noel had already sang Don't Look Back in Anger, Liam said he'd sing Wonderwall. Once he'd shown Liam the song, he just dug it off and let Liam sing, which was fine. It was a cool way of doing it. When I was recording Liam, he was singing really well, and his voice was very open. So he was doing takes very, very, very confidently and very quickly. He was so easy to record. I think Liam was quite keen to get in and sing it. So Liam would have sang just to acoustic guitars, drums and bass. And he'd have done 4 takes of it. I was just doing 4 takes of him at the time and compiling. I'd always auto-tune him as well, and everyone seemed happy with that. I used it all the time on Definitely Maybe, so I used it all the way through Morning Glory as well.
Because maybe you're gonna be the one that saves me.
And last of all, track 13, backing vocals. And these, interestingly, are not sung by Noel despite what you see on the music video. These are sung by Liam.
I said maybe, you're gonna be the one that saves me. You're gonna be the one that saves me. You're gonna be the one that saves me.
So that's it. For Wonderwall, I only counted 13 tracks. I think part of Wonderwall's enduring appeal is how different it is to everything else on the Morning Glory album. And it just shows that if you have the right chords and the right melody and the right words, a song can shine completely in and of itself without needing massive, complex arrangement. Thanks for watching, guys. As usual, let me know if I've missed anything, and I'll see you next time.